Let's talk about USCIS interviews. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down the different categories of questions you may get at a Stokes interview. There are two types of interviews that you can have in a marriage-based green card process. It can be a less rigorous interview where the officer is interviewing you and your spouse together, but then there's something called a Stokes interview where the officer is interviewing you separately and asking you more detailed questions about your relationship and then comparing your answers, basically trying to figure out if you two know each other. So let's break down what those type of questions are so that you are prepared for your interview. I am U.S. Immigration Attorney Lillian Chukwurah, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. There are 9 categories of questions that you will probably get in a Stokes interview. So let's get into it and talk about what each one really is all about. The first one is relationship start. This is, how did your relationship start? When did you meet? How did you meet? Where did you have your first date? Who said I love you first, right? Everything that happens at the beginning of your relationship. That's what the relationship start is. So knowing, where did you have your first date? When did you have your first date? I always tell people that the answers to these questions can be different for the two spouses. Not because they're lying, but because something that's a date to one person may just be a hangout to another. So making sure that you're on the same page as far as your first date is so crucial. I've had clients where one person will say, okay, we had Dunkin' Donuts on our first date, and the other person will be like, no, that's not our first date. We went to this dinner at this location. That's the first date. But that first time you met up with each other, maybe a first date for somebody, and then the first time you actually went on a date, dressed up for, that may be the first date for the other. Doesn't mean that you're lying. It just means that you two consider different things a priority as far as what the first date is. Okay, so don't freak out when it's different, as long as you can explain the difference. All right, the next thing is the wedding, right? When did you propose? Who was at the wedding? What were the colors? Things like that. That's what you're looking at for the wedding. Okay, they want to know who was at the wedding so that they can corroborate your story. All right. So if one spouse says that all the family were there, and then the other spouse says only, 2 or 3 people were there, questions are going to arise as to who's actually telling the truth, were family actually at the wedding, all of that. If you have children and your children did not come to the wedding, the officer may want to ask additional questions about why the children were not at the wedding. And then, did you have a honeymoon? Right? If you had a honeymoon, where was your honeymoon? All of those questions come under the wedding category. All right. So again, be sure that you're on the same page. Another question that comes under this clearly is, when did you get married? What dates did you get married? And where, the location you got married. So did you get married at a church? Did you get married at City Hall? At a courthouse? That's what they're actually asking there. And then also, in what city and state did you get married? All right. So really important to know that beforehand. The next step is your daily life. This is second. So this is second to relationship start. Okay. These questions are super important. Right? The questions about your daily life, your nighttime routine, your day-to-day with each other, it's super important. So knowing your day-to-day routine is so important for your interview. Now, type of questions you're going to get in this category are, who gets up first, right? Who wakes up first? What do you have for breakfast? Those type of questions. And who takes care of the finances? What day is your garbage picked up? So if you live in a house where you have to actually take out your trash, or is there a dumpster that's picked up? That's kind of what they're asking there. Who does the dishes? Who does the cooking? What time do you get home from work? Right? What time does your spouse get home from work? Where does your spouse work? When do they start work? What's their schedule? Right? If you say that their schedule is varied, it changes week to week, the officer may then ask you, okay, for this past week before the interview, what was your spouse's schedule? And then when your spouse gets in there, they're going to ask them the same question to make sure that your answers match up. So again, really important to pay attention to your life when you are filing a green card application, because you and your spouse are going to be interviewed. So the next thing is the nighttime routine. The officer here wants to know about your nighttime life. They're not going to ask you sexually explicit questions, but they are going to ask you about the size of your bed, who sleeps on what side of the bed, what color is your comforter. They want to know that you actually sleep together in the same room. So that's why they're asking you those questions. One of the questions that people get that they just, why did they ask me that question? Well, because they want to know if you know your own home. And that question is, imagine that this office is your bedroom and the door is on the right. Where is everything else? Right? And when they say that, they literally mean, where is everything else? Meaning, where is your bed compared to where the door is? How many windows and what wall are those windows on? Right? What is, where is the closet? If you have dressers, where are the dressers? If you have nightstands, where are the nightstands? They want to know everything, because when your spouse comes in, they're going to ask them the same question and compare your answers. Most of the time, when the officer asks that question, they are drawing what you're saying and then comparing it to what your spouse says. Quick story here. We had a client where they went to their interview and this question came up and they gave different answers, right? And then they came to us to respond to the notice of intent to deny, because the officer said that they didn't believe in the relationship because they gave different answers. But here's the thing. The officer says, imagine that this is your bedroom and the door is where my office door is. Where is everything else? What the officer didn't know and what the clients didn't think about to tell the officer is their bedroom has 2 entrances. There's 2 doors. So one spouse described the bedroom from the perspective of one of the doors, and then the other spouse described the bedroom from the perspective of the other door. They were both right. It's just they did not explain to the officer that there's 2 doors in their bedroom. And we had to, with pictures and descriptions and all of that, explain it to the officer in our response to the notice of intent to deny and get their case approved. So it's really important that when you're answering this question, you are making note of those type of changes that the officer may not be aware of. So if there's different things that you're, in perspective for you when you're answering that question, really important to let the officer know that too. Something like there's 2 doors, okay? And which door are you describing it from? Next thing is the home, right? We talked about your nighttime routine. Let's talk about the home. The home is so important. Again, they want to know, are you actually living together? That's the point of the Stokes interview, is to make sure that you are actually living together. You are actually in a marital relationship. That's the point of the Stokes interview. So next up on this is the home. They want to know, do you live in a home or an apartment? How much is your rent? How much is your mortgage? Right? What does your stove use, gas or electric? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? This is where those questions are coming in, okay? If people live with you, who lives with you? So if you say, oh, my sister lives with us. Okay, what's your sister's name? Do they have children? What's their schedule? Because now you're opening up to more questions. So if someone lives with you, you need to know their schedule too, right? You need to have information about them, unless it's just a purely roommate that you two do not engage with. But if a family member lives with you, the officer is most likely going to ask you questions about that family member's routine as well. If you have children, definitely the officer is going to ask you questions about the children, where they go to school. Do they take the bus to school? Where do they take the bus to school? Right? Where do they get picked up by the bus? Where do they get dropped off by the bus? What grade are they in? Those are the type of questions you should expect when you say that multiple people live with you. And those questions are going to depend on who lives with you. So children are going to be more about their education, their day-to-day life. And then parents, like, do they work? Where do they work? What do they do for work? All right. So just wanted to flag that for you as far as who's living in your home. Next up, how many doors? What type of windows? What type of couch? What color is your blinds? Like those type of questions. The home, they literally mean the home. What is in your home? All right. Next up is the cooking. Who does the cooking? Is it a joint effort, or does one person do it more than the other? Where do you go grocery shopping? It's really important that you pay attention to this, right? When I put the category the cooking, I do not literally mean just the cooking, okay? There is different aspects of it. And one of those is, who does the grocery shopping? Where do you do the grocery shopping, right? Which grocery stores do you go to? If you order out, where's your favorite place to order food from? Where's your favorite place to order pizza, right? I've had that question asked. Another good question that the officer may ask is, what did you two eat yesterday for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? If you say that, oh, you were both home all day, the officer is going to ask you, okay, what did you eat for dinner last night, right? If you two were, working all day, did not see each other till night, and didn't eat food together, that's okay. But you need to let the officer know that, and your answers need to match, okay? Again, questions that can come up under this is, what's your spouse's favorite food, right? What's their favorite food? And if you don't know that, the officer may question you. And sometimes your spouse does not have a favorite food. And that's okay to say too. Don't feel like you have to give an answer when the answer truthfully is they don't have one, right? Don't make up something. If they don't have a favorite food and you know they don't have a favorite food and they've told you they don't have a favorite, don't go to the interview and tell them, oh, their favorite food is rice and peas. And then they get in there and say, oh, I don't have a favorite food. My wife knows that. Okay, so really important that you do not feel like you need to make up an answer. Truth is always the best. You don't need to remember the truth. Okay, all right, so the next set of questions is family, right? How much do you know about each other's family? That's what this is asking now, right? Have you met each other's family? How often do you see each other's family? If you live in the same country, in the same state, in the same city as each other's families, the officer may then ask, when was the last time you saw each other's families, right? Do you typically celebrate holidays together? Did you buy them gifts last holiday, right? And then it gets into, how many brothers and sisters does your spouse have? What are their parents' names? What are their siblings' names? Do they have nieces and nephews? What are their names? Again, if you don't know the names of the nieces and nephews, but you know they have 4 nieces and 3 nephews, you just don't know their names, okay, that's fine, right? But if you don't know their parents' names, if you don't know their siblings' names, and you've met these people, questionable, right? Red flags being raised. There's certain questions that just raise major red flags, and not knowing your spouse's family is a major, major red flag. So next up is technology. This is where they ask you about what type of phone does your spouse use? What type of car does your spouse drive? What type of car do you drive? So again, they can compare your answers. I've seen them ask about what's your Wi-Fi password. Most people don't memorize their Wi-Fi password unless they have changed it from what's on the router. The officer may, under this category, ask you, how did you get to your interview that day, right? Who drove? Was it your spouse? Was it you? What car did you use? If you said that you and your spouse do not have a car, then this question is even more important, because the officer is going to now ask you, how did you get here if neither of you drive, right? Did someone bring you? Did you use Uber, right? That's the type of question that can come up here, all right? If your spouse listens to the radio when they're driving into work, what do they listen to? If they watch TV, what do they watch? What's their favorite movie? What was the last movie you two watched together? What's the last TV show you two watched together? That's what you're gonna expect in this kind of category. Again, the officer is trying to gauge how well you know your spouse based on your answers to this question. All right. If your spouse just watches YouTube videos about cats and that's their jam, that's their favorite thing to watch, it's okay. The officer is not going to judge you or your spouse that they like cat videos. But they will judge you and your spouse if you do not know that your spouse loves watching cat videos on YouTube. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then the last category is celebrations. Celebrations are important because it tells the officer how you to celebrate holidays, celebrate birthdays, right? So depending on the last holiday, major holiday that was had. So it's October right now. So let's say July, right? There's July 4th holiday. How did you spend that holiday? So the officer tries to go back whatever the last holiday was. So if we just finished Christmas and New Year and Thanksgiving, they're going to ask you about that. How did you spend your Thanksgiving? Right? How did you spend your Christmas? How did you spend your New Year? Did you get each other presents for Christmas? Right? Did you spend time with family for Thanksgiving? Who cooked? Where did you go? Who was there? Right? If you say you went to someone's house, whose house did you go to for Thanksgiving? Those are the type of questions. All right. When is your spouse's birthday? What did you get them for their birthday? What did they get you for your birthday? Whenever your last birthday was. Right? What's your spouse's favorite holiday? If they don't have one, they don't have one. Most people have one. Most people have one. So just know that. And then again, what was the last movie you watched together? What was the last time you two went out together? Those are the type of questions you can expect on the celebrations category. All right. So those are the 9 categories and the type of questions to expect under each one. Now let's talk about some things to keep in mind. In any of these categories, your answers can raise a red flag for the officer. Okay? In any of these categories, your answers can raise a red flag for the officer. And it's your job to explain that red flag to the officer. Okay? So let's say you go to your interview and there are questions that do not match. The officer will most likely either send your case to fraud investigations or send a notice of intent to deny if they feel like they have everything they need to make a final decision. If they send it to fraud investigations, you are likely to get a home visit. Okay, a home visit is where a USCIS officer from the fraud investigation unit comes to your house, knocks on your door, and talks to you or your spouse or both of you if you're both home at that time. They may ask to come in and see your home. Right? The reason they want to come in and see your home is to see if you are living as a couple. Right? Is your spouse's clothes there? Are there shoes there? Are there pictures of you and your spouse in the home? That's what the home visit is really all about. If one spouse is not home, the officer will most likely have you call the spouse that's not home to see, if you say they're at work, call them, see if they will pick up. Most of the time, if someone's at work, they're probably not going to pick up, or they may have their phone on Do Not Disturb, but they always want you to do that. All right. And then after they do the home visit, they may do additional home visits. If there's another home that they think you may be living at, they may do a home visit there as well. Something else to keep in mind with these home visits is that if you have an attorney, please let them know as soon as that home visit happens, and they can debrief you as far as what happened, what was said, what did the officer say, what did you do, what did they want to see, just so there's a record of what happened at that home visit. If you are not home when the officer comes, they may choose to talk to your neighbors, or they can come another day. If they choose to talk to your neighbors, they can ask your neighbors questions about, do you know the people that live next door? If they say yes, then they can answer additional questions about, okay, who do you typically see next door? What do they look like? How often are they there? Those type of questions. So it's really important that if you know your neighbors, you just say hi to your neighbors, be nice to your neighbors. But just know the officers can talk to your neighbors as well. I've seen cases where the case blew up because the neighbors really did not know who lived there and basically said it was someone else when it was really the petitioner and the beneficiary. So neighbors can cause problems for you. So be nice to your neighbors, okay? And then if they send you a notice of intent to deny, you have 33 days to respond to that. I tell people 30 days because you need to get it to them within that 33 days. And part of that can be mail, right? Because it may take you 3 days to get it to them through the mail. So make sure that you're just looking at 30 days from the date on your notice of intent to deny, and that you are putting as much evidence as possible with your response that will make it easy for the officer to make a positive decision in your case. So that is the 9 categories of a Stokes interview, right? The 9 categories, again, these are broad categories, and the officer can ask you bunch of questions under each category, or they may just pick 1 or 2 to ask you questions on. It does not mean they're going to ask you questions from all of these categories, but these are the categories that I see a lot in these interviews, and I want you to be prepared for each and every one of them. If you do not have an interview and your case is approved without an interview, which is still happening, congratulations. But if you know you have an interview coming up, use this video to prepare for your interview. And if you would like to do a mock interview with me to make sure that you are fully prepared, where I will ask you all of the questions and compare your answers, basically act as the USCIS officer, go ahead and reach out to me. You can do that through my website or by calling my office. All my contacts are in the details for this video, and we can set you up for a mock interview. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.